So if you want to move to Portugal, come with an open mind. It's a beautiful country with great people. If you fall in love with the country like we do, you can come and live your best life. Hi, I'm Terry Coles, and this is why I chose to live in Tavira, Portugal. The year was 2011 when my husband Clyde wanted to retire from his career as a firefighter and paramedic in Corpus Christi, Texas. He has an ex-wife that gets a third of his pension. He was only 57, I was 51, so we weren't collecting Social Security. So there wasn't much left to live on, with U.S. health care at that time being $1,400 a month. With the help of International Living, he said, if I can find a country where we can retire and live on my small pension, are you willing to go? I said, where are we going and when? So the first country we chose was Panama. We lived happily there for 5 years until we took our first ever trip to Europe. We went back to Panama as changed people. We had fallen in love with the idea of travel or maybe living in Europe, but where? The more we traveled and looked around, we understood that Portugal offers one of the easier visa options for Americans and Canadians to obtain. We're currently living in Tavira, Portugal, which is a southern strip called the Algarve, has some of the best weather in all of Europe. And look at the view, it's just gorgeous. This is actually our third location. We started near the city of Caldas da Rainha on the Silver Coast. It was very affordable, but for us it was much too cold and rainy. The sun never came out. So after 2 years there, despite loving the area so much, we moved to the Algarve, lived for the next 2 years in Vila Moura, where we rented a 2-bedroom condo in a complex with a pool. But the summertime, all of the units around us filled up with noisy tourists that like to have parties, so we had enough of that. We had made many friends that lived in Tavira, so decided to move to Tavira. The nice part about Tavira is the beaches are on an island. They're on the island of Tavira. So they can only be accessed by a short ferry ride. So that keeps the bulk of the tourists out of the city and out of our lives for the most part, unless we want to get on the boat and go to the island. This is one of the many ferries that goes to Tavira Island, and as you can see, a bunch of people are coming back right now. It's $2.50 per adult for a round-trip ticket, $1.10 for children, and it leaves quite frequently. The Portuguese people are some of the most warm, welcoming people we've ever met. My husband Clyde and I have traveled to much of Europe, and you can't say the same about every country. And because the Portuguese children start studying English at a young age, I think they study the language for 7 years, English is really widely spoken here, but that's not to say you shouldn't learn the language, and we do speak Portuguese. But it's affordable. It's the most affordable country in Western Europe to live. It has modern infrastructure. It has a great expat community no matter where you live in the country. It has some of the best weather in all of Europe, especially in the Algarve where we are. And you don't have to take the driver's test in the local language, which you do in some of the other European countries. It's a matter of getting paperwork and swapping your US or Canadian license for a Portuguese one. So the country has a lot to offer. It also has great affordable health care. Tavira has a sizable expat community. There's 200 or 300 Americans alone that live here. And then there's a large European population. There's many people from the United Kingdom. We have friends from all over the world, which makes it so much fun. We can be as busy or as not busy as we choose to be here. Tavira is also the representative Portuguese community for the Mediterranean diet, so it's easy to eat healthy and stay healthy here. So the lifestyle throughout Portugal is very healthy. It's very Mediterranean. There's a lot of bread, wine, healthy food options. Produce, fruits and vegetables are grown locally in Portugal, and if you eat them in season, they're very affordable. Another thing about the lifestyle is the cafe culture. We can meet friends for a coffee in the morning, and before we know it, the restaurant is setting up for lunch. You can drink 1 cup of coffee, 1 glass of wine, or a bottle of water and stay there the entire day if you want. They're not in a hurry for you to leave that table so they can turn it and get more money. It's just so warm, welcoming, and relaxed. The climate The entire Algarve, which is the southern strip of Portugal, has some of the best weather in all of Europe. Between the Algarve and southern Spain, it doesn't get any better. I compare the Algarve to Florida in the US. We have hot, dry summers. Actually, it's about 90 degrees today. And if you see in this pond behind me, there's a duck in there. He has the right idea because it is warm. 90 degrees is not the norm here. It's been comfortably in the 70s and 80s for most of the summer. So we love the hot, dry summers. The winters in Portugal are very rainy throughout the country. The Algarve receives far less rain, so we're not burdened with a lot of rain here. It never snows throughout the whole country. There's one ski resort way up in the mountains that we have never been to. So what's not to love about the weather here? Tavira is pretty walkable. It's mostly flat. It is cobblestone throughout, just like the rest of Europe. And when it's rainy, the cobblestones can get slippery, but there's not that much rain in Tavira or the rest of the Algarve. The average cost of living, I think I would tell people, is about 2,000 euros, so maybe a little more in US dollars. You can find rentals for 300, 400, 500 euros a month, but they won't offer heat, they won't offer parking, they won't offer an elevator. So you might find a 300 euro rental on the 6th floor, but it's a walk-up. If you're coming here to retire, you're not going to want to do that. You're not going to want to carry groceries up the stairs. So for a couple like us, an American couple that likes to have a car, likes to get out and eat once in a while, we live on about 3,000 or so a month. And that's a pretty good life, but we don't eat out every night. We eat at home, we cook a healthy plant-based diet. So figure anywhere from 2,500 and up, depending on your lifestyle. Gasoline is very expensive. It's around 6 or 7 euros a gallon, but cars are more efficient here. Cars are smaller because roads are tiny. So average cost of living, 2,500 and up. Our current living situation, we have a modern, fully furnished 2-bedroom apartment in Tavira, Portugal. We're in a building that's about 7 years old. We have double paned windows. We have air conditioning units that also provide heat. They're called split units here, and they're the most efficient when it comes to electricity. So our current situation, our rent is 1,200 euros a month. Like I said, you can find cheaper, but it may not have a heating system. Central heat is not a given throughout Portugal or throughout other parts of Europe either. And apartments are set up here, and most places are apartments, but even freestanding homes. There's doors to every room, so you can close off the door to that room. If you're sitting in the living room, you can heat or cool just that room, and you don't have to waste the money heating or cooling the entire house, like we're used to in the US. My husband and I have not lived in the US since 2011, so we're kind of out of touch with reality to compare Portugal prices to US prices. But every time our friends take a trip back to the US and come back, they always go, "Oh my gosh, everything is so expensive there. You wouldn't believe the price of groceries. You wouldn't believe how expensive it is to eat out." So the newer people that come up to us and rave about the price of groceries in the store, I guess I can believe them and say the prices are much more affordable here. Just take a glass of wine in any restaurant. You can buy a decent bottle of wine in a grocery store for about 1 or 2 euros in a grocery store. If you go to a restaurant, you're looking at 3, 4 euros maybe, depending on how big of a pour it is and what the restaurant is. You can't get that anywhere in the US, I'm sure. And it's good wine, it's what the Portuguese drink. I like to cook, and we like to eat a healthy, whole foods, plant-based diet, so we don't tend to eat out too much. We're living on a smaller budget than many people, but we've also been retired for 13 years, far longer than some of our friends that are just retiring in their 70s. So we tend to spend a lot of money on groceries because I do so much cooking. I'd say maybe 500 a month we spend on groceries. We eat out once in a while and we look for cheaper options, and when we do eat out, we spend 10 or 12 euros a meal. and maybe add a glass of wine or a cup of coffee at the end. If you want to visit Portugal, you can stay for up to 90 days without needing a visa. You'll just be on a tourist visa. But if you fall in love with Portugal, and I'm sure you will, you'll have to apply for a long stay resident visa. The visa process for Americans and Canadians is pretty straightforward. It starts in your home country, not in Portugal. It starts online with a website called VFS Global. You'll have to secure accommodations, health insurance, show that you have money to live on. There's many different options, but it's pretty easy and straightforward once you get the directions. As part of the visa process, you're required to show proof of private health insurance. Now, Portugal does have both a public health care system, which is very cheap, but it's overworked and underpaid. And most Portuguese and expats prefer to use the private system for that reason. Private health insurance is very affordable here. When we first started out, we were paying about 320 euros a month. My husband currently is 69 and I'm 63. Over the past year, health insurance costs have skyrocketed. They went up about 50 or 60%. And now we're paying about 550 euros per month. Still far cheaper than we would ever pay in the US. Here's an example. A few years ago, my husband was hospitalized in one of the finest private hospitals here. We went to the US, we got COVID, we both recovered. A month or two later, some of his symptoms came back and he had a cough, and I took him to the private hospital. He was admitted through the emergency room. He was put into a private room, a vegetarian meal diet of his choosing. He had daily tests run. 6 days in a private hospital. Our total cost upon leaving was 1,400 euros. Before we submitted the bill to our insurance company, and about 250 euros after. Couldn't even get in the door of any US hospital for 250 euros. So healthcare here is very good. We prefer to use the private system, but we do have the public system here for emergencies. The public healthcare system throughout Portugal is best left for major trauma, heart attacks, strokes, things like that. When we call an ambulance, they will come and they will take us to the nearest public hospital. But in the private system, I can go on the website, look at the doctors, and pick the doctor of my choosing. I can see what languages they speak. We do speak Portuguese, but I prefer to find a doctor that speaks English. But we've been very happy with the healthcare system here. Portugal has 3 international airports. They have the major one in Lisbon in the middle of the country. They have one about 30 minutes from where we live in Faro, and they have one on the opposite end of the country in Porto. They're currently talking about putting a second one in Lisbon to handle some of the traffic because that takes the bulk of the air traffic. We can hop on a plane and book a budget flight to Paris for about 40 euros. It's incredible. 2-hour flight to Paris for 40 euros. Sometimes we upgrade for extra leg room or to bring more luggage, but budget travel all around Europe is very affordable and very fun. Trip back to the US, we're looking at 6 to 8 hours. If you're on the West Coast, a little more. We don't go back to the US that often. Some of our friends do, but haven't checked flights lately. I think you could easily get a round-trip flight back to the US for under $1,000. Of course, we all know the prices on airlines vary by what day you fly, what time of season it is, and where you're going. So it varies, but it's very affordable, and you can never worry that you won't be able to go back home and visit your friends and family again. Another nice perk for us, because we live about 20 minutes from the Spanish border, so we can drive to Spain anytime we want. We can drive into Ayamonte, Spain, which is the first town we come to. We could have tapas for lunch and drive back home later that day. The beautiful medieval city of Seville is just a 2-hour drive. It's a fun weekend trip. And if you're like many Americans who will miss what they can buy at Costco warehouse, Seville also has a Costco warehouse. We went once and we were not really impressed. It was not really American products that we were looking for. It was geared to the Spaniards. But driving over the Spanish border is easy. There's no border checks. The only reason you know you're in Spain is the signs change from Portuguese to Spanish. Portugal has some of the best highway systems in the world. They're well maintained. They have rest stops along the way, so there's plenty of places to stop and take a potty break, get a drink or a cup of coffee. Portugal has great internet. It's high speed. It's fiber throughout the country, unless you live maybe in a tiny village, but even when we lived rurally, we had great internet. So digital nomads keep in contact with people back home is very simple here and very affordable. Our internet cell phone package for 2 cell phones and the internet, I think runs us about 65 euros a month. So it's very good. Portugal has a great door-to-door mail system. You can easily receive packages. We don't get junk mail like you do in the US. Rarely we get a leaflet or something, but it's not a common thing. It's not advisable to have shipments sent from the US because they can get stuck in customs, but we have Amazon out of Spain, Germany, or France. If we order from Amazon Spain, often it arrives in our mailbox the next day. It's a great system here. Whatever we can't find here, we can order from Amazon Spain. So what advice would I give to someone considering moving to Portugal? First of all, come on a scouting trip. Spend as much time as you can afford to here. You can stay up to 3 months if you can afford to. Rent a car, drive from one end of the country to the other. Prior to your visit, connect on Facebook groups with other expats that live here, like myself. Plan to meet with them along the way, share a glass of wine, pick their brains and ask them what they like and don't like about the country. Every country has its little flaws, and Portugal is no exception. But you have to embrace the changes and not expect Portugal to change to meet your needs. And whatever we can't find here, we order from Amazon Spain, and it often comes in a few days. So if you want to move to Portugal, come with an open mind, learn all that you can about the country, the language, and the people before you come here. It's a beautiful country with great people. And if you fall in love with the country like we do, you can come and live your best life. Come meet with us. We'll share a glass of vinho verde someday, and I hope to see you in Portugal. Até logo!